Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, a USS Defiance. The stars outside looked peaceful, but Jake knew that peace could change in seconds. His crew had been exploring space for 3 months now, looking for new worlds and new friends among the stars. The ship's radio made a sharp sound. Lieutenant Amy Brooks looked up from her station. "Captain, we're getting a distress signal from the Kepler system. It's weak, but someone needs help." Jake nodded. "Set course for Kepler." Full speed. The Defiance moved through space toward the signal. Jake had heard stories about the Kepler system. It was home to a race called the Felari. They looked like big cats that walked on 2 legs. From what he knew, they were brave fighters who had built a strong civilization. 3 days later, the Defiance arrived at Kepler Prime. What Jake saw made his stomach turn. The planet's surface was covered with huge golden buildings that looked like temples. Around these buildings were smaller structures that looked more like cages than homes. Dr. Linda Hayes, the ship's scientist, studied the readings from her instruments. "Captain, I'm seeing millions of life forms down there. But something's wrong. The energy patterns don't match what we know about Felari technology." Jake ordered a landing party. He took Linda, Amy, and 4 security officers down to the planet's surface. They landed near one of the smaller buildings. As they walked toward it, Jake could hear strange music playing from speakers hidden in the walls. A Felari male approached them. He was tall and covered in orange fur with black stripes. His clothes were simple and gray. Most shocking of all, he wore a metal collar around his neck. "Welcome, strangers," the Felari said in perfect English. "I am Keeper Thekmer. Are you here to see our masters?" Jake felt confused. "Masters? What masters?" Thekmer's ears drooped. "The great Zephyrians, of course. They have blessed us with their rule for many years. They give us food and shelter. In return, we serve them as we should." Linda stepped forward. "Thekmer, can you tell us about your people's history? What were the Felari like before the Zephyrians came?" The cat-like being looked puzzled. "Before? There was no before." Honored scientist. "The Zephyrians have always been our guides. They saved us from chaos and gave us purpose." But Jake noticed something in Thekmer's eyes. Deep down, behind the programmed words, there was sadness. There was also something else. Feared out as they walked through the settlement, Jake saw more disturbing things. Felari children were separated from their parents at age 5 and taken to special schools. Adult Felari worked in the fields and factories, where all the food and goods they made went to the golden temples. The Felari themselves ate only simple grain paste. In the central square, a huge screen showed images of Zephyrian leaders. The creatures on the screen were tall and covered in golden scales. They had 4 arms and eyes that glowed like fire. A propaganda broadcast spoke of the Great Order and how lucky all the galaxy's species were to serve such wise masters. Amy touched Jake's arm. "Captain, look at that building over there." Jake followed her gaze to a structure that looked different from the others. It was older and made of different materials. On its walls were carved pictures that showed Felari warriors in battle. These warriors carried weapons and wore armor. They looked proud and strong. "Thekmer," Jake called to their guide. "What is that building?" The Felari looked nervous. "That is the old place. We are not supposed to go there. Our masters say it contains lies from the time of darkness." That night, Jake and his team returned to the USS Defiance. Linda spent hours studying the data they had collected. Her face grew more serious with each passing hour. "Jake, this is terrible," she said finally. "The Felari weren't always like this. Their genetic patterns show they were once a warrior race. They had advanced technology and a complex culture. The Zephyrians didn't just conquer them. They broke their spirits, and made them forget who they used to be. The next morning, Jake's worst fears came true. A massive ship appeared in orbit around Kepler Prime. It was 10 times larger than the Defiance and shaped like a golden pyramid. The ship's communication system sent a message to Jake's vessel. Unknown ship, you will prepare to receive an official of the Zephyrian Empire. You will show proper respect and follow all protocols. Jake had no choice but to agree. An hour later, a shuttle docked with the Defiance. The airlock opened, and Supreme Commander Veltar entered. Jake's ship. Veltar was even more impressive in person than on the propaganda broadcasts. He stood 8 feet tall, and his golden scales seemed to glow with their own light. His forearms moved with perfect grace, and his burning eyes looked at everything as if he owned it. "Welcome, unknown species," Veltar said in a voice like rolling thunder. "I am Supreme Commander Veltar of the glorious Zephyrian Empire. You have entered space that belongs to us, but do not fear. We are generous to those who show wisdom." Jake's crew stood at attention behind him, but Jake himself remained seated in his captain's chair. "I'm Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Fleet. We received a distress signal from this system." Veltar's eyes flashed with something that might have been amusement. "There is no distress here, Captain Morrison. There is only order and peace. Your species shows promise. You have traveled far and built impressive ships. We offer you the same gift we have given to thousands of other races." "What gift is that?" Jake asked, though he already knew the answer. "The gift of purpose. The gift of belonging to something greater than yourselves. Your people will serve in our fleets. Your children will learn our ways in our schools. Your worlds will know perfect peace under our protection. All we ask in return is your loyalty and obedience." Veltar spread his forearms wide as if he was offering a blessing. "You need only kneel before me now, Captain Morrison, and your species will take its rightful place in our great empire." The bridge of the Defiance fell completely silent. Jake could hear his own heartbeat. He looked at Veltar's burning eyes, then at his own crew. Amy was tense and ready to fight. Linda looked sick with worry. The security officers had their hands near their weapons. Jake stood up slowly. For a moment, Veltar smiled, thinking the human was about to kneel. Instead, Jake looked the alien commander straight in the eyes. "We decline your offer," Jake said quietly. The words seemed to hang in the air like a physical thing. Veltar's smile disappeared. His scales began to glow brighter, and the temperature in the room seemed to rise. "I do not think you understand, Captain Morrison. This is not a request. This is how the galaxy works. This is how it has worked for 300 years. Jake crossed his arms. "Then maybe it's time for the galaxy to work differently." The news traveled fast through the Zephyrian Empire. On 1,000 worlds, alien commanders could not believe what they were hearing. A species had said no to the great Zephyrians. It had never happened before. Admiral Beth Cooper sat in Earth's military command center, deep underground beneath the Rocky Mountains. The room was filled with screens showing data from across the solar system. Every screen showed the same terrifying sight. Ships were coming. Lots of ships. How many? Beth asked her aide, Colonel Gary Johnson. Gary looked at his tablet. 300 confirmed, Admiral. Maybe more. They're coming from 6 different directions. They'll be here in 4 days. Beth had been a soldier for 30 years. She had fought in wars on Earth and in space, but she had never faced anything like this. The Zephyrian ships were enormous. Each one was the size of a small city and carried enough weapons to destroy a planet. Earth's entire space fleet had only 50 ships. Most of them were converted cargo vessels with weapons bolted on. Against the Zephyrian armada, they looked like toys. On the main screen, Supreme Commander Veltar appeared. His golden scales were brighter than before, and his four arms moved in angry gestures. "People of Earth," he began, his voice carrying across every radio and television on the planet. "You have made a foolish choice. Your Captain Narration has insulted the natural order of the galaxy, but we are merciful. Surrender now, and your punishment will be light. Resist, and we will make your world an example that the galaxy will remember forever." Beth turned off the screen. Around her, officers and technicians worked frantically to prepare Earth's defenses. They all knew the truth. Earth could not win this fight. But they were going to fight anyway. Dr. Susan Clark, Earth's top military scientist, studied the intelligence reports about Zephyrian technology. Their ships had shields that could stop nuclear weapons. Their weapons could cut through Earth's strongest armor like paper. But Susan noticed something interesting in the data. "Admiral," she called to Beth, "I think I've found something." Beth walked over to Susan's workstation. "What is it?" "The Zephyrians have been ruling for 300 years. In all that time, they've never faced real resistance. Look at their battle formations. They're perfect for intimidation, but terrible for actual combat. They fly in straight lines. They always attack from the front. They've forgotten how to fight a real war." Beth studied the tactical displays. "What are you saying, Doctor?" "I'm saying they expect their enemies to be afraid. They expect them to surrender or run away. They don't know how to handle someone who fights back." 3 days later, the Zephyrian fleet arrived at Jupiter. Beth watched from Earth as the alien ships formed a perfect line in space. They were beautiful and terrible, like golden stars against the black sky. The first battle happened near Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. Captain Ryan Brooks led a squadron of 12 Earth fighters against a Zephyrian cruiser. The alien ship was 50 times larger than any of the human vessels. Ryan's pilots followed the plan Susan had developed. Instead of flying in formation, they scattered in all directions. Instead of firing from long range, they got in close where the big ship's weapons couldn't track them easily. The Zephyrian cruiser fired its main guns, but the beams passed harmlessly through empty space. The alien commander had expected the humans to fly straight at him, just like every other species had done for 300 years. Ryan saw his chance. His fighter was damaged and losing power. Instead of retreating, he did something no one had ever done before. He aimed his ship directly at the cruiser's engine section and pushed his throttle to maximum. "This is Phoenix Leader," Ryan said over the radio. "Remember us?" His ship smashed into the cruiser at tremendous speed. The explosion was visible from Earth. When the light faded, the Zephyrian cruiser was drifting in space, powerless and broken. On the flagship of the Zephyrian fleet, Commander Zekth stared at the tactical display in shock. "How is this possible? How did such a small ship destroy one of our cruisers?" Supreme Commander Veltar's scales glowed with rage. "It was a lucky shot, nothing more. Continue the attack." But Ryan's sacrifice had shown other human pilots what was possible. Lieutenant Commander Carol Davis led another attack group against a Zephyrian destroyer. This time, 3 human ships made ramming attacks. The destroyer exploded in a ball of fire. The pattern continued throughout the first day of battle. The Zephyrians had superior weapons and shields, but they could not adapt to human tactics. They had never faced enemies who were willing to die. To win, Captain Lisa Park commanded a group of converted cargo ships armed with nuclear missiles. Her ships could not match the alien speed or firepower, but they could do something the Zephyrians did not expect. They could hide. Lisa's ships powered down their engines and drifted like space debris. When the Zephyrian patrol ships came close, the humans suddenly came to life. At close range, even primitive weapons could damage alien shields. The battle for Earth's solar system lasted 3 days. It was fought among the moons of Jupiter, in the asteroid belt, and finally near Mars itself. The humans lost 47 ships and 2 million brave souls. But they destroyed 31 Zephyrian vessels and damaged many more. On the third day, something incredible happened. The Zephyrian fleet retreated. Admiral Beth Cooper could not believe the reports from her surviving ship commanders. "Say that again, Captain Park." Lisa's voice came through the radio, tired but triumphant. "The Zephyrian fleet is withdrawing, Admiral. They're running." Beth sat down heavily in her chair. Around her, the command center erupted in cheers. But Beth knew this was only the beginning. Earth had won the first battle, but the war was far from over. On his flagship, Supreme Commander Veltar tried to understand what had happened. His species had conquered thousands of worlds. They had never retreated from battle before. "Commander," his aide said carefully, "what are your orders?" Veltar stared at the tactical display showing his damaged fleet. One thought kept running through his mind. The humans had made them bleed. In 300 years of conquest, no species had ever made the Zephyrians bleed. "Send a message to the High Council," Veltar ordered. "Tell them we need reinforcements, many reinforcements." But even as he gave the order, Veltar felt something he had never experienced before. Doubt. The humans had shown the galaxy something dangerous. They had shown that the mighty Zephyrians could be hurt. News of the battle spread through the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. On worlds where enslaved species toiled under Zephyrian rule, beings gathered around hidden radios to hear the impossible story. The humans had fought the gods and won. On Falari Prime, old Detmer listened to the broadcast in his small dwelling. For the first time in decades, he remembered what his people had been like before the Zephyrians came. They had been warriors once. They had been free. Deep in his heart, something began to stir. Something that the Zephyrians thought they had. Destroyed forever. Hope. The keeper of the old temple touched the metal collar around his neck. Maybe the masters were not gods after all. Maybe they were just bullies with big ships. And maybe, just maybe, bullies could be stopped. Across the galaxy, millions of enslaved beings had the same thought. The humans had done the impossible. They had made the gods bleed. If hairless apes from a backwater world could hurt the Zephyrians, what could the rest of the galaxy do if they worked together? For the first time in 3 centuries, the oppressed species of the galaxy began to dream of freedom. And that dream was about to become very dangerous for their masters. The age of unquestioned Zephyrian rule was ending. The humans had fired the first shot in a war that would reshape the galaxy forever. 6 months after the Battle of Earth, Commander Lisa Park sat in a stolen Zephyrian transport ship. The vessel looked like any other cargo hauler from the outside, but Lisa's team had modified it with human technology. Hidden weapons, better engines, and most importantly, communication equipment that the Zephyrians could not detect. Lisa was not alone. Her team included specialists from Earth's military and scientists who understood alien technology. Their mission was simple but dangerous. They were going to teach the galaxy how to fight back. "Approaching Falari Prime," announced Sergeant Tony Martinez from the pilot's seat. Tony had volunteered for this mission because his brother had died in the Battle of Earth. He wanted to make sure his brother's sacrifice meant something. The transport landed at a busy spaceport. Lisa and her team looked like ordinary traders thanks to holographic disguises. They carried legitimate cargo and forged identification papers. The Zephyrian guards barely glanced at them, but Lisa was not here to trade. She was here to find Vecmar. It took 2 days to locate the old Falari. He was working in a factory that made decorative items for Zephyrian homes. When Lisa approached him during his rest period, Vecmar's ears flattened against his head in fear. "I have done nothing wrong," he said quickly. "I work hard. I follow all rules. Lisa sat down beside him. Vecmer, do you remember me? I'm from a ship that visited your world. The old Felari looked around nervously. You should not be here. The Masters do not allow unauthorized contact with subject species. The Masters are not here right now, Lisa said quietly. And I have something to show you. She activated a small device that projected holographic images in the air. The images showed the Battle of Earth. They showed human ships ramming into Zephyrian cruisers. They showed the alien fleet retreating in defeat. Vecmer stared at the images with wide eyes. This is real? This truly happened? It happened, Lisa confirmed. The Zephyrians can be beaten. But we need help. We need allies. That night, Vecmer led Lisa to the old temple, the building with the carved pictures of Felari warriors. In a hidden basement beneath the ancient structure, they found other Felari who still remembered the old ways. My grandfather told me stories, whispered a young female named Kirith. Stories of when our people flew among the stars as equals, not slaves. Lisa spent 3 weeks on Felari Prime. She taught the secret resistance fighters how to make bombs from cleaning supplies. She showed them how to disable communication equipment and sabotage transport vehicles. Most importantly, she taught them that they did not have to fight fairly. The Zephyrians expect you to be obedient, Lisa explained to a group of 30 Felari gathered in the hidden basement. They expect you to follow rules. But resistance means breaking the rules. It means fighting dirty. It means being unpredictable. Tony Martinez worked with younger Felari who still had fighting spirit. He taught them how to move silently, how to strike quickly, and how to disappear before the enemy could respond. Remember, Tony told his students, you are not trying to destroy their whole army. You are trying to make them afraid. Every time they leave their bases, they should wonder if they will come back. The lessons spread quickly. Within a month, Zephyrian supply convoys began disappearing. Communication towers went silent for no apparent reason. Food shipments meant for the alien administrators were poisoned or simply vanished. But Lisa's mission was bigger than just one world. She traveled to the Thackeray homeworld next. The Thackeray were very different from the Felari. They looked like giant insects and thought with a hive mind that connected all members of their species. What one Thackeray learned, they all learned instantly. This made them perfect students for human tactics. Chief Engineer Kate Johnson had joined Lisa's team for the Thackeray mission. Kate was an expert at building things, and she quickly saw the potential in Thackeray technology. Look at this, Kate said, examining a Thackeray maintenance robot. They use these things to clean buildings and repair equipment, but with a few modifications. She showed the Thackeray engineers how to turn their maintenance robots into weapons. The robots could carry explosives into Zephyrian facilities. They could be programmed to attack at specific times. Best of all, no one suspected maintenance robots of being dangerous. The Thackeray hive mind absorbed every lesson instantly. Within days, they had improved on Kate's designs. They created robots that could change shape to avoid detection. They built bombs that looked like everyday tools. They even developed a way to turn garbage processors into weapon factories. Incredible, Kate said as she watched Thackeray workers demonstrate their new creations. You learn faster than any species I've ever seen. But the Thackeray taught Kate something too. They showed her how to think like a group instead of an individual. Human tactics became even more effective when entire populations could coordinate their actions perfectly. Lisa's next stop was Aquatica, a world covered mostly by oceans. The native Merhai were amphibious beings who could breathe both air and water. They had been used by the Zephyrians as underwater construction workers, and deep-sea miners. Captain Danny White led the training mission on Aquatica. Danny had been a Navy diver before joining the space program. He understood underwater warfare better than anyone else on Lisa's team. The Murhai proved to be natural guerrilla fighters. They could attack Zephyrian facilities from underwater, where the aliens never expected threats to come from. They could plant explosives on the hulls of ships and disappear into the depths before anyone knew they were there. Your people have a huge advantage, Annie explained to the Murhai resistance leader, a scarred veteran named Splashadar. The Zephyrians cannot chase you underwater. Their equipment does not work in your environment. You can hit them and vanish. Underwater attacks began immediately. Zephyrian mining platforms started sinking for mysterious reasons. Transport ships developed strange leaks that forced them to make emergency landings. Underwater cables that carried communications across the planet were cut in dozens of places. As Lisa's team moved from world to world, their network grew larger. Each species they trained began training others. The Felari taught the cat-like, Vexani how to move silently. The Thakari shared robot-building techniques with the mechanical Kogari. The Murhai showed amphibious species from other worlds how to attack from underwater. But the most important thing Lisa's team taught was not tactics or weapons. It was hope. On every world they visited, Lisa told enslaved beings the same thing. You are not alone. Across the galaxy, millions of your brothers and sisters are fighting back. The Zephyrians want you to think you are powerless, but you are not. Together, we are stronger than they are. The message spread from world to world, carried by traders and travelers. Hidden radios broadcast coded messages that only the Resistance could understand. Ancient communication networks that the Zephyrians had forgotten about came back to life. Supreme Commander Veltar sat in his command center on the Zephyrian capital world, reading reports that made his golden scales burn with fury. Every day brought news of new attacks. Every week, another world fell into chaos. How? He demanded of his advisors. How does one primitive species cause so much trouble? His chief strategist, Commander Zeke, had been studying captured human equipment. Supreme One, they do not fight like we do. They do not try to conquer territory or control resources. They fight for an idea. What idea? Veltar snapped. Freedom, Supreme One. They have convinced our subjects that they do not have to obey us. Worse, they have taught them that disobedience can succeed. Veltar stood up from his throne, his four arms clenched into fists. Then we will crush this rebellion completely. Send orders to all sector commanders. Any world that shows signs of resistance will be sterilized. We will kill every living thing on those planets as an example to the others. But Zeke looked worried. Supreme One, if we destroy entire worlds, we will lose their production capacity. Our empire depends on the labor of subject species. Then, we will find new subjects. Veltar roared. The galaxy is full of species that can be trained to obey. But first, we must destroy this cancer before it spreads further. The orders went out across the Zephyrian Empire. Military fleets began moving toward rebel worlds with orders to kill everything that moved. The Great Purging was about to begin, but Lisa Park and her team had expected this. For months, human strategists had been preparing for the Zephyrian response. They knew that cornered tyrants always chose the same solution: total destruction. Lisa received the coded message while training resistance fighters on the mining world of Rock-Tar. The message was simple but clear. Operation Prometheus is go. All teams returned to base immediately. As her transport ship lifted off from Rock-Tar, Lisa looked down at the world she was leaving behind. The aliens down there would face terrible danger in the coming months. Many of them would die. But they would not die as slaves. They would die as free beings fighting for their right to exist. The final phase of the war was about to begin. The killing began at dawn on 1,000 worlds. Zephyrian battle fleets moved from planet to planet, burning everything in their path. On Falari Prime, orbital bombardment turned forests into ash. On the Thackeray homeworld, poison gas killed millions of the insect-like beings in their underground cities. On Aquatica, the oceans themselves began to boil. Admiral Beth Cooper watched the horror unfold from Earth's command center. The screens showed destruction on a scale that made wars look like playground fights. Entire civilizations were dying because they had dared to dream of freedom. "Casualty reports coming in," Colonel Gary Johnson said quietly. His voice was steady, but his hands shook as he read the numbers. Falari Prime, 80% casualties. Thackeray homeworld, 60%. Aquatica, 40% and rising. Beth closed her eyes. Billions of beings were dying, and it was partly her fault. Earth had started this rebellion. Earth had given these species hope. Now they were paying the price for that hope. But Colonel Steve Rogers, Earth's top military strategist, had been planning for this moment. For 6 months, his team had worked on something they called Operation Prometheus. It was desperate, crazy, and probably impossible. It was also their only chance to end the war. "Admiral," Steve said, "it's time." Beth nodded. "Brief the crew." In a secret shipyard hidden in the asteroid belt, workers had been building something that had never existed before. The ship was called the USS Retribution, and it was unlike anything humanity had ever created. The Retribution was not the biggest ship or the most heavily armed. Instead, it was the smartest. Every system on the ship came from a different species in the Resistance Network. Thackeray computers that could think faster than any human brain. Falari stealth technology that could make the ship nearly invisible. Murhai adaptive armor that could change shape to deflect enemy weapons. But the ship's real weapon was not made of metal or energy. It was made of ideas. Captain Alex Turner had been chosen to command the Retribution because he was the best pilot Earth had ever produced. He could fly anything, fight anyone, and adapt to any situation. He was also willing to die for what he believed in. Alex stood before his crew in the ship's main briefing room. 200 beings looked back at him. 50 were human. The other 150 came from dozens of different species across the galaxy. They all knew this was a one-way mission. "We are not going to win this war with guns," Alex told them. "We are going to win it with truth. The Zephyrians have ruled for 300 years because everyone believes they cannot be defeated. We are going to prove them wrong." Dr. Rachel Davis, the mission science officer, explained the technical details. The Zephyrian Empire is controlled from their capital world, Zephyr Prime. Every command, every broadcast, every order goes through their central communication hub. If we can take control of that hub, we can speak to the entire galaxy at once. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Phillips, the ship's tactical officer, laid out the military challenges. Zephyr Prime has never been successfully attacked. It's protected by orbital fortresses, energy shields, and the largest fleet in the galaxy. Getting there will be hard. Getting close enough to broadcast will be harder. Getting out alive will be impossible. Alex looked around the room at faces that represented dozens of different species. Humans sat next to Falari. Thackeray engineers worked alongside Murhai warriors. Former enemies had become allies in the fight for freedom. "I won't lie to you," Alex said. "Most of us will not survive this mission, but our deaths will mean something. Every being in the galaxy will see what we do. They will know that the Zephyrians can be beaten. They will know that freedom is worth fighting for." A young Falari named Kirith raised her hand. She was one of the resistance fighters that Lisa Park had trained. "Captain, what if we fail? What if the Zephyrians stop our broadcast?" Alex smiled. "Then we make sure our failure is so spectacular that it inspires others to try again. The Retribution launched 3 days later. As it left the solar system, Alex received messages from across the galaxy. Resistance cells on hundreds of worlds wished them luck. Survivors of the Great Purging sent their prayers. Even some Zephyrian subjects who had not joined the rebellion secretly hoped the mission would succeed. The journey to Zephyr Prime took 2 weeks. The Retribution used every trick in the book to avoid detection. They followed shipping routes used by cargo vessels. They hid in asteroid fields and behind moons. They even disguised themselves as a damaged Zephyrian patrol ship. But as they got closer to the enemy capital, avoiding detection became impossible. Zephyr Prime was the most heavily monitored world in the galaxy. Sensors watched every approach route. Patrol ships checked every vessel that came near the system. "Contact," Sarah Phillips announced from her tactical station. 3 Zephyrian destroyers moving to intercept. They're demanding identification. Alex activated the ship's communication system. Using stolen codes and false identities, he convinced the patrol ships that the Retribution was carrying captured resistance leaders to Zephyr Prime for public execution. The lie worked for 12 hours. Then a routine security scan revealed the truth. All units, came the broadcast from Zephyrian Command. Unknown vessel in Sector 7 is hostile. Repeat, hostile vessel approaching the capital. All ships converge and destroy. The final battle had begun. The Retribution faced odds that would have been hopeless for any normal ship. 50 Zephyrian cruisers and destroyers moved to surround them. Orbital defense platforms turned their massive guns toward the human vessel. Energy barriers designed to stop entire fleets powered up to block their approach. But the Retribution was not a normal ship. It had been built specifically for this mission. Activating Filari stealth systems, announced Chief Engineer Kate Johnson. The ship seemed to flicker and fade, becoming nearly transparent. "Thackeray Evasion Pattern 7, called out the navigation officer, a insect-like being named Clictar. The ship began moving in ways that confused enemy targeting systems. "Merhai, adaptive armor responding to incoming fire," reported the damage control chief. The ship's hull shifted and changed, deflecting energy beams that should have destroyed them. The Retribution fought its way through the orbital defenses like a ghost ship from legend. It appeared and disappeared, struck without warning, and survived. Hits that should have been fatal. The crew worked together with perfect coordination, each species contributing their unique abilities. But Alex knew they could not fight forever. The ship was taking damage, and more enemy vessels arrived every minute. They had to reach the communication hub before their luck ran out. "There," Sarah Phillips pointed to the main screen. "The central spire. That's where all communications are controlled." The spire was a tower that stretched from the planet's surface into orbit. It was protected by energy shields and weapon batteries. Getting close enough to dock with it would be suicide. "All hands, prepare for final approach," Alex announced over the ship's intercom. "This is what we came here to do." Master Sergeant Carlos Rivera led the assault team that would storm the communication hub. His team included the best fighters from every species on the ship. They knew they were probably going to die, but they were ready. The Retribution's final approach was a thing of beauty and terror. The ship dove toward the spire like a falling star, dodging defensive fire and enemy interceptors. At the last possible moment, Alex pulled up and brought them alongside the tower's docking port. "Boarding party away," Carlos reported as his team rushed into the spire. What happened next became legend throughout the galaxy. The assault team fought through level after level of Zephyrian defenders. They used every tactic that human trainers had taught resistance fighters across the galaxy. They were unpredictable, ruthless, and completely fearless. The Zephyrian guards had the best weapons and armor in the galaxy, but they had never faced enemies who fought with such desperate courage. Carlos and his team pushed forward, leaving a trail of destruction behind them. On the bridge of the Retribution, Alex watched as enemy ships closed in from all sides. The ship's defenses were failing. Hull breaches appeared across multiple decks, but they just needed a few more minutes. "Carlos, report," Alex called over the radio. "Almost there, Captain," came the reply between the sounds of gunfire. "2 more levels to go." Alex looked at the tactical display. 30 enemy ships surrounded them now. The Retribution could not survive much longer. "All crew members, this is the captain," Alex announced. "It has been an honor serving with you. Remember, we are not just fighting for ourselves. We are fighting for every being who dreams of freedom." The Retribution shuddered as enemy fire tore through its hull. Decks began losing atmosphere. Emergency systems screamed warnings that no one had time to hear. "Contact from the assault team," Sarah Phillips called out. "They've reached the communication center." On the spire's highest level, Carlos and his surviving team members burst into the main control room. Zephyrian technicians scattered as the multi-species assault force took control of the galaxy's most important communication hub. "Get me a channel to every world in the Empire," Carlos ordered a captured Zephyrian operator. The alien's golden scales were pale with fear. The explosion of the USS Retribution lit up the sky of Zephyr Prime like a new sun. Across the galaxy, billions of beings had watched the human ship's final moments. They had seen gods bleed. They had seen tyrants bow. Most importantly, they had heard the truth. On Falari Prime, old Vic Mur stood in the ruins of his factory. Zephyrian bombardment had destroyed most of the city, but the communication spires still worked. Every surviving Falari had seen the broadcast. They had watched their former slave keeper, Carlos, force a Zephyrian commander to his knees. The humans kept their promise, Vecmer said to the other survivors gathered around him. They showed. Use that the masters can be beaten. Young Kirat H stepped forward. Half her face was scarred from the orbital bombing, but her eyes burned with new purpose. Then we should keep fighting for ourselves, for the humans who died for us, for everyone who dreams of freedom. Within hours, the Falari resistance emerged from hiding. They were no longer the careful saboteurs that Lisa Park had trained. They were warriors reclaiming their birthright. Ancient weapons caches were opened. Forgotten battle songs were sung. The cat-like beings remembered what they had been before the Zephyrians broke their spirits. On the Thackeray homeworld, the hive mind buzzed with new thoughts. The broadcast had reached every surviving member of their species instantly. What one Thackeray learned, they all learned. What one Thackeray felt, they all felt. And what they all felt now was rage. The insect-like beings poured out of their underground cities like an angry swarm. They brought with them the weapons that Kate Johnson had taught them to build. Maintenance robots had become army. Garbage. Processors had become weapon factories. Cleaning supplies had become chemical warfare. But most importantly, they brought coordination. The Thackeray hive mind could organize attacks across multiple worlds simultaneously. When they struck everywhere at once. On Aquatica, the Merhai rose from the poisoned oceans. Many of their people had died when the Zephyrians boiled the seas, but those who survived were angrier than any storm. They had learned underwater warfare from Danny White. Now they would use those lessons to drag their oppressors into the depths. Across the galaxy, the pattern repeated itself. Species that had been slaves for centuries suddenly remembered they had once been free. The broadcast from the Retribution had done more than show them the truth. It had given them permission to act on that truth. Supreme Commander Valtar stood in his temporary command center, watching his empire crumble on 1,000 screens. Every world was in rebellion. Every species was fighting back. The great purging had failed. Instead of crushing the resistance, it had turned every survivor into a warrior. How many ships do we have left? Veltar asked his aide, Commander Zekth. Consulted his reports. 40% of the fleet is still operational. Supreme 1. But they are scattered across the galaxy, trying to contain the rebellions. We cannot concentrate our forces without abandoning entire sectors. Veltar's scales had lost their golden glow. For the first time in his life, he looked old and tired. And if we abandon those sectors, the rebellions will spread. Each victory will inspire more uprisings. The humans have created something we cannot stop with military force alone. But Veltar was not ready to surrender. He was a Zephyrian. His people had ruled the galaxy for 300 years. They would not be defeated by primitives and slaves. Contact the High Council, he ordered. Tell them to activate the final protocol. Zekth's eyes widened in horror. Supreme 1, the final protocol will destroy everything. Our empire, our subjects, our own worlds. Nothing will survive. Then nothing will survive, Veltar said coldly. If we cannot rule the galaxy, we will deny it to everyone else. The final protocol was the Zephyrian Empire's ultimate weapon. Hidden across the galaxy were massive bombs that could destroy entire star systems. They had been built as a final deterrent, a way to ensure that no enemy could ever claim complete victory over the Zephyrians. But before Veltar could activate the protocol, something unexpected happened. A group of his own officers entered the command center. They were led by Commander Zekth, and they all carried weapons. Supreme Commander Veltar, Zekth H said formally, by order of the High Council, you are relieved of command. Veltar stared at his subordinates in shock. Zekth, what is the meaning of this? The meaning is that you have lost your mind, Zekth replied. You would destroy the galaxy rather than admit defeat. The High Council has decided that you are no longer fit to lead. You dare betray me? Veltar's scales began to glow with rage. I am your supreme commander. You swore oaths of loyalty. We swore oaths to the Empire, Zekth corrected. Not to your madness. The war is over, Veltar. We have lost. It is time to negotiate surrender before there is nothing left to surrender. The coup was swift and bloodless. Veltar was arrested and removed from power. Zekth H took control of what remained of the Zephyrian military and immediately sent a message to the resistance leaders. To all species fighting for freedom, the message began. This is Commander Zekth H of the Zephyrian Empire. We request an immediate ceasefire and negotiations for our surrender. The negotiations took place on the neutral world of Haven, a small planet that had never been conquered by the Zephyrians. Representatives from dozens of species gathered to discuss the future of the galaxy. Admiral Beth Cooper led the Earth delegation. Lisa Park represented the resistance movement. Old Vecmer spoke for the Falari. The Thackeray sent a collective consciousness named Group Think 7. From every corner of the galaxy, beings who had once been slaves now sat as equals at the same table as their former masters. The terms of surrender were harsh but fair. The Zephyrian Empire would be dissolved. All conquered worlds would be granted independence. Zephyrian military forces would be reduced to a small defensive fleet. Most importantly, all species would be guaranteed equal representation in a new galactic government. Commander Zekth signed the surrender documents with 4 hands that shook slightly. The age of Zephyrian dominance is over, he said simply. May the age that follows be wiser and more just. But the hardest part was not the political negotiations. It was deciding what to do with the Zephyrians themselves. Many species wanted revenge for 3 centuries of oppression. They wanted to see their former masters suffer, as they had suffered. It was Thekmer who spoke against vengeance. "If we become like them, and we have learned nothing," the old Filari said. "The humans did not fight to create new masters. They fought to create equals. In the end, the galaxy chose mercy over revenge. The Zephyrians were given reservation worlds where they could live in peace. They would not rule anyone, but they would not be destroyed either. Some species thought this was too lenient. Others thought it was the beginning of true civilization. 50 years later, the galaxy was a very different place. The Galactic Council included representatives from over 1,000 species, all with equal voices. Trade flowed freely between worlds. Wars still happened, but they were small conflicts between equals, not the systematic oppression of the strong. Over the week, former Chief Engineer Kate Johnson, now an old woman with gray hair, stood before the Council as Earth's senior representative. She was giving a speech to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Retribution sacrifice. "The humans who died aboard that ship were not perfect," Kate said to the assembled representatives. "They were not gods or heroes from legends. They were ordinary people who chose to do something extraordinary. They chose to fight for the freedom of beings they had never met, on worlds they would never see." In the audience, beings from dozens of species listened quietly. There were Filari, warriors who had never known slavery. There were Thackeray engineers who built wonders instead of monuments to oppression. There were Merhai explorers who swam between the stars as equals to all. "The Zephyrians taught us that might makes right," Kate continued. "They were wrong. The humans taught us that right makes might. When free beings stand together, no tyrant can stand against them." After the ceremony, Kate visited the Memorial Garden on Haven. It was a peaceful place where monuments honored all who had died fighting for freedom. At the center stood a simple stone carved with the names of the USS Retribution's crew. An old Zephyrian approached her as she stood before the memorial. It was Zeekth, now wearing simple civilian clothes instead of military uniform. His scales had faded to a dull bronze, and he walked with a cane. "Engineer Johnson," he said respectfully, "I hope you do not mind my presence here." Kate looked at him with curiosity rather than anger. "Not at all, Commander. We're all free beings now." "I wanted to apologize," Zeekth said quietly. "For what?" "My people did. For the suffering we caused. For the centuries of oppression." Kate nodded. "Apology accepted. But you should know that some of your people fought with us at the end. Some Zephyrians chose freedom over empire. Perhaps that is our species' redemption," Zektach replied. "We cannot undo the past, but we can try to build a better future." As the two former enemies stood together before the memorial, children from a dozen different species played together in the garden. Human children ran alongside young Filari. Thackeray larvae crawled next to Merhai tadpoles. Zephyrian youngsters, born free, laughed with beings their parents had once ruled. This is